One Piece chapter 979. Now this was a very good chapter, definitely a step up from the previous chapter because we had a lot of pages in this chapter which came with a lot of information and a lot of progression towards certain plot points at Onigashima, specifically the one about Kaido Son and the Flying Six. And just coming off of the break, this was actually worth it. This chapter was very fulfilling in terms of what we expect from a chapter. Granted, we are on break next week again, so One Piece for the time being, anime and manga wise, is going to be on a very sketchy schedule because of all the outbreak that's going on in the world right now. But again, Oda should take his time because these breaks might actually help him develop the story even better. But going back to the chapter here, as far as enjoyment goes and progression, this chapter is definitely top tier because we got a lot of information on the Flying Six. We got some character interaction with the Straw Hats, which a lot of people like to see once in a while, and we also got typical Luffy going into the enemy's territory by himself, so trouble is definitely brewing in this chapter. But before we dive into this chapter, something that definitely caught my attention, and I guess the attention of the community today, if you've read the chapter, is that on the cover page we get to see the Tontadas, and what's very strange here is that they notice a Tarte ship from Whole Cake, and drifting on it seems to be Pound. Now this is a head scratcher for me because from what it seems like, or what this chapter is insinuating, is that Pound is alive somehow, even though it was hinted that he was killed off by Oven back in Whole Cake Island. Again, this is one of those things where Oda might be bringing him back to the story even though he doesn't really play that big of a role, and I feel like he should have just stayed dead. Like, we have no use for Pound in the story, so it's very sketchy what Oda is doing here, and it's very apparent that, again, one of the things that he doesn't like doing in the story is killing off characters, and Pound's death, I think, was one of the highlights of Whole Cake because it was very tragic, and that is something that Oda doesn't normally do, and that's why a lot of people in the community liked it. It was a sad moment back in Whole Cake Island, but this chapter might break that moment we had, and this sort of makes everything that Pound did in Whole Cake mean a lot less or mean nothing at this point. But again, we do not know the full story. Is that Pound, or does Pound have like a twin just like Lola? I don't know. There's a lot of questions to be said here, but you know, right now it seems that Pound is alive, and honestly this is reminding me of Pal back in Alabasta. And it's funny because I did a whole video on who is going to die in Wano about several weeks ago, and I'm not too sure if anyone of relevance is gonna die at all anymore if Pound isn't getting killed off. And this also sort of reinvigorates the idea that Pedro might be alive as well. I could see people bringing that up now given what we got from this chapter, so that's very strange. I'm not a big fan of the cover page at all, probably the worst part of the chapter, but again, we'll see what Oda has in store for this. But let's start from the beginning. Now the chapter starts off with a brief summary of everything that's happened so far in terms of the Alliance's plan to infiltrate into Onigashima, and this was a good summary, I think, because, you know, coming off of the 2-week break that we had and a lot of exposition that we got in the previous chapter, I think this summary was well placed. And finally we get something pertaining to Kanjuro, and ever since he left the shore with Momonosuke a few chapters ago, we questioned as to where he was going, and of course Onigashima should have been the right choice because he had to tell Orochi about the Alliances making their way to Onigashima, and this was something that even Kinemon mentioned in the last chapter, where Kanjuro should have already contacted Orochi because he left the shore a lot earlier. And here it was revealed that he wasn't able to get to Onigashima because this is the first time he's been there, which makes a lot of sense because Kanjuro for the most part has been with the Scabbards the entire time, relaying information to Orochi, and since Kanjuro is still affiliated with the 9 Scabbards, the Beast Pirates don't necessarily recognize him as an ally yet because that hasn't been brought into light in terms of his role as a spy. It's only Orochi that knows this for the most part, and we also know that Onigashima is huge in terms of scale. This is probably one of the biggest islands we've ever seen, so I'm not surprised that Kanjuro got lost. So very interesting development here, and I'm actually looking forward to where this goes, especially when it comes to Momonosuke and what he has in store. Now for the second half of the chapter, we got some Straw Hat interaction, which is always great to see, especially given that we now have Jinbei officially a part of the crew, and he fits in perfectly. And this almost reminds me of the pre-time skip days when we had all the Straw Hats in one place, and it's honestly very refreshing to see because for the most part in the new world, in most arcs, the Straw Hats are usually split, and so seeing everyone just having fun is is great to see. And of course, we got a lot of funny moments here and there, and a lot of things that could come from it. And honestly, this is just Straw Hat 101, where Luffy is giving permission to do whatever he wants. Granted, he is the captain of the crew, but like, no one is literally keeping tabs on Luffy, and even when they do keep tabs on Luffy, it usually goes wrong, and that's what happened here. So Frankie tells everyone where's Luffy, and Jinbei responds by saying that when Kid's crew rushed in front of them, Luffy said that he was going to stop them because they didn't know Kinemon's plan. And at this point, everybody knows what's happening here. Luffy is probably going to get spotted. They knew that more than likely Luffy was most likely going to get spotted by the opposition, and Zoro, being the quote-unquote vice captain that he is, told himself that since Luffy is going to get spotted, it's better that I go with him to make sure that he doesn't get noticed. And again, the Straw Hats had a word reaction because Zoro's gag will most likely come into play here. So Kid, Luffy, and Zoro are definitely separated for the time being, but it does open up the idea of them striving for different goals at Onigashima. So maybe Zoro has a mini plot with Orochi and the samurai, Luffy with the underlings of Kaido, and Kid possibly having something to do with the Big Mom pirates. So each of them will be dealing with different things while still being covert, but that isn't going to last long, especially with Luffy's mindset. Now, I'm always against them splitting up, but I think this was necessary to some degree, and I was definitely hoping for a Zoro Luffy moment just like we had in Punk Hazard about how Luffy should take things more seriously, because that was what I assumed Zoro's advice for Luffy was going into Onigashima, because I'm not sure if everyone truly knows the magnitude of this war. But again, Zoro is definitely getting lost at this point. That gag is just going to play on, so he's going to find his way somewhere that he shouldn't be. Again, Zoro is a supernova, so it makes sense that Oda would separate him because he's strong enough to fend for himself. And I'm actually surprised that Jinbei allowed this to happen, honestly, but again, this was flashbacks to interactions that doesn't happen that often, so this was great. We also get to see Frankie's new upgraded inventions, and the Straw Hats are just having fun showing it off. And obviously, when it comes to Frankie's tech, every Straw Hat just goes into this shiny eyes mode, right? Everything is cool, especially Chopper and Usopp. And obviously at the end, we have Jinbei and Robin talking, and Jinbei mentioned something very interesting, and that is that in most cases, people wouldn't be happy-go-lucky before going into war. If anything, people would be more tense. But Jinbei states that those who take light of the situation can be crucial factors in this war. So that was a very interesting take by Jinbei, because we had the Straw Hats celebrating in the last chapter. So the question in mind was that, are they really taking this seriously? But again, this just goes back to how the Straw Hats operate. It's just more so of them living in the moment. Now, we also get to see someone spying on Robin and Jinbei at the end there. Again, the paneling was kind of weird there. I'm not sure what I was seeing exactly, but it seems that someone was there listening to them, because we also get to see their speech bubbles. So interesting stuff there. And finally, we move on to the Flying Six and Kaido. Easily the most interesting part of the chapter, because I'm liking the Flying Six a lot more now. Now here we get more information as to why the Flying Six were summoned, and these guys were essentially summoned to find Kaido's son, whose name was finally revealed to be Yamato. And what's very interesting here is that the Flying Six are a group of ex-pirate captains that are aiming to become an all-star in Kaido's crew. And obviously what Law said during Punk Hazard is an example here. When you go into the new world, you either join the Yonkos or you fight against them. And here with the Flying Six, these guys are aiming for the all-star position, basically commander position on the Yonko's crew, which puts the Flying Six on a higher pedestal because each of them are captain class pirates, and the only reason they've made it this far is because they were strong. And this also goes to the nature of Kaido's crew, where strength is viewed to be above all. Prove yourself that you're strong, and Kaido would let you join his crew. And this gives more clarity as to why X-Drake did what he did after Subodi, whereas he started to make his name more prevalent by attacking Kaido's bases in hopes that he would get Kaido's attention. It makes more sense now. And so if they're able to find Yamato, they are granted permission to fight the Calamities, and Who's Who is someone that seems to be looking forward to this. Based on his words in the previous chapter, he might be pretty strong, as he was the one who brought up the question about Queen losing his position. He might have have a more prominent role than the other Flying Six, with the exception of X-Drake, of course. So very interesting stuff here with the Flying Six. They must be pretty powerful based on this chapter. I really like the whole conversation they had there. I also liked what we got with King here. Again, the right hand man is always sort of separated from the other commanders, and he seems to want smoke from these guys. So King is very interesting too. So with Luffy, Zoro, and Kid being separated, I think it makes some sense that some of them might encounter the Flying Six. But overall, this was a really solid chapter. Now, I will be also checking the Viz manga translation when that comes out, because we had subtle differences in the last chapter. So translations here might be a lot different than the actual Viz manga. So I'm looking forward to that, and you guys should also check it out when you can, when it comes out on Sundays, especially in chapters that have a lot of exposition. You definitely want to see the Viz manga translations to see if there's any things that are different. But again, just my quick thoughts on the chapter. Comment down below what you guys think. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more One Piece content. It is Pharaoh, and I will see you folks later. Peace.